Okay, so is that nothing section? There's a water bottle down there?
Yeah, that's. Oh yeah, you can put it on the table. It's mine. Can you pop it on the table? It's mine. Thanks, Cassandra.
It's empty. You want me to just put it up next to my chair?
Everything could start in 3 minutes.
Okay, so like,
Questions will come to you through WhatsApp, right?
Yeah, that's fine.
so
We should have this.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Could everyone take their seats, please?
are we doing questions? Are we doing online questions in the first Q&A section, or just the second Q&A section? Both. You want an online question
Yes.
held? Well, do you want to choose the question then, if they all come in here?
Okay. So, good morning, everybody. My name is Francine Hetherington Raveney, and I'm the Deputy Executive Secretary of the Council of Europe's Enlarged Partial Agreement on Sport, otherwise known as EPAS, which organised with our Portuguese hosts this 18th Council of Europe Conference of Ministers responsible for sport. It's my absolute pleasure to open this focus session on leadership through gender equality in sport and dual career by handing the floor to Gianluca Esposito, who is the Director General for Human Rights and the Rule of Law at the Council of Europe, and who has done a vast amount in the field of equality at the Council of Europe. Before I do so, I would like to welcome both those of you following the focus session in the room, but also those of you following online. And just be rest assured that there will be plenty of moments during the course of the morning when you'll be able to ask the speakers questions, because the session is designed to be interactive. And if you are online, the link is slido.com, and you have access to a code on the screen. Director General, if you'd like to.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Francine. State Secretary Diaz, dear Pedro. Let me start by thanking you for this wonderful dinner we had last night. I think I can speak on behalf of all of us and say that it was a truly remarkable, both in terms of actual venue where we were, the incredible performance that we have seen at the beginning and at the end, and also the actual pleasure of being together with you in that. So thank you very much once again. Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to simply welcome you all to this focus session. I really hope that this will be interactive. I 100% agree with Francine. And I would just say a few words to from the Council of Europe side. Leadership through gender equality and the development of an effective system of dual career for athletes are vital factors for modern and balanced sport. Changes in leadership configuration can only be achieved through implementing positive measures. So I look very much forward to discussions that will take place today. You should know that the outcome of this discussion will actually feed quite directly into the work that we are doing at the Council of Europe in this area. Now, in the area of gender equality, as highlighted, we have done quite a bit of work already in Strasbourg. In 2015, the Committee of Ministers addressed a recommendation to the governments of the member states on gender mainstreaming in sport, which really calls for greater efforts to ensure that sport organizations actively promote gender equality in their activities. I also wanted to mention the All in Plus project of the European Union and the Council of Europe. One of the indicators that we measured in that project has to do with leadership. As we all, I think, look forward, I'm certainly forward to the results that will be presented at the Luxembourg event next year. Your career is actually key to the development of well-founded leaders, and it helps athletes balance sporting ambitions with a professional career, fostering leadership qualities that are crucial on and the field. And by connecting dual careers with leadership development in sport, it is possible to support personal growth and contribute to effective governance. Uh, a lot of people ask me during these couple of days I've been here, what is the advantage of being in EPAS, and what's the added value? I see that is really one of the added values, the opportunity to discuss with experts on issues that are common to all our member states. And I think we have take advantage of the good practices taking place in one or the other states, one or the other organization that can be shared across the membership. So I do see that this particular topic is one where I see the progress is needed, and by working together, I think we will achieve that progress. Let me conclude by thanking very much all the speakers for having accepted our invitation, and I look forward to the thoughtful exchanges that we will surely have today. I wish everyone a beautiful morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director General. So I'm now honoured to hand the floor to Pedro Diaz, Secretary of State for Sport in Portugal. And before I do so, I would just like to reiterate, as Gianluca has already done so, our warmest thanks to him and his country for their strong support in hosting the 18th Council of Europe Conference of Ministers responsible for sport. It has been a special, intensive, if rainy at times, a few days in Porto. But the warmth of the hosts and their commitment to the values of the Council of Europe in the area of sport are clear. Secretary of State, if you would like to come to the lectern. Thank you.
Good morning. I will start addressing you in English, and would you please put your handsets, because I will have my words afterwards in Portuguese. But just to have a brief introduction, to thank the participation of almost all the countries of the Council of Europe during these 3 days. It has been a short journey, but intense, as has been said by Gianluca and Francine. It's of course a pleasure to welcome, to fulfill the compromise of the previous government that in 2023 accepted the challenge to host this conference. And this is very important to honor the compromises. And it was a pleasure. It was really great to have the declaration signed, agreed yesterday. And of course, this is the last day. And just to introduce you, it's a great pleasure to me to see the attendance of this room. Almost all the sports family of our country is here. And it's with great pleasure that we are closing this conference with this level. Muito bom dia.
Good morning, dear ministers, dear Director General of the Council of Europe, dear members of the Council, EPAS members, dear sports family, let me take advantage of this opportunity on behalf of the President of the Olympic and Paralympic Committee, who joins us, to greet you all, dear athletes. I see a lot of them in the room, ladies and gentlemen. This is the last day of the 18th conference of the Ministers of Sport of the Council of Europe. We look at leadership in sport, focusing on gender equality and for the dual career. Let me tell you that these two items are quite dear, close to my heart. I have worked hard in both these fields, and later in my speech, there will be a special mention. As the Director General has said, leadership is detrimental for us to be able to implement the strategies. This is what we are discussing, strategic measures that we wish to implement. So we need strong leadership to do it. Pivotal subjects that are at the agenda of the Portuguese government. Women in positions of leadership in sports, as coaches, directors, other fields also not just contribute to a balanced environment, but also inspires new generations to overcome stereotypes and prejudice. Gender equality goes beyond just inclusion. It means to provide egalitarian opportunities and to break barriers that limit the participation of women. At this conference of ministers of sport and members of the government, countries who are part of the Council of Europe had a female representation of approximately 20%. Naturally, this is a figure that makes us think. We need the commitment of all and consistent policy so that gender equality becomes a reality in our countries. Another important thing is the relevance of the dual career, the ability that we have to provide assistance to our youth to reconcile sports with professional and vocational training. This brings safety, stability. So, this means that they are not abandoning their academic career to become athletes. Units that support this kind of initiative are a reality since 2016. So we started in higher education this year. Let me just say this side note to convey that recently, 4 or 5 weeks ago, we were at a meeting with the ambassadors of all countries of the Council in Strasbourg, where we presented this conference to ambassadors, a meeting that was put together by our diplomatic mission in Strasbourg. And the Director General of the Council of Europe was quite surprised and very interested in this program due to the units that support high performance, which began in 2016. After the meeting, he made a point of meeting with us so that we could explain what this program is all about. We will present it here today. I think it's amazing in terms of best practices. And this is the way that we will be able to grow in sports in the Council of Europe. The program of these units that provide support to high performance have been detrimental. We are very proud of them. It's an example of best practices that we will have the pleasure of sharing programs that foster personal development, education, so that youngsters build their own resilience and expand their horizons. Social transformation via sports means that youth will be debating all of this We need new approaches and we need to work together. Back to leadership. Like I told you in the beginning of my speech, this is quite a personal note, but allow me to share it with you. As you must know, I began my time in office on the 25th of April of 2024, but for 13 years, I've worked in an area where I had an amazing experience, which was to work effectively in implementing programs and plans that are deeply connected to what we are discussing here today. Inclusion in terms of female participation or people with disabilities, and sports training and dual careers. This message is for the leaders sitting here, not just members of government, but also for presidents of federations and confederations. We could only implement those programs in the Portuguese Football Federation because leadership, specifically the president, he's sitting here with us, were deeply committed for this to happen. If we wish to transform, if we wish to make it happen, to have more women in sports, dual career programs that allow our youth to reconcile both worlds, to have people with disability to be provided with opportunities to practice sports. We, the leaders, are the ones to provide said opportunities. Allow me to begin this session. I know it will be very, very fruitful. I'm looking at Tisha, for example, Tisha Penicheiro, our athlete. I remember perfectly 1995, Tisha and a set of friends were at the national team. They were in the US already reconciling their academic training with their sports career. An athlete, an extremely brilliant athlete, but she was able to reconcile everything with her academic training. We are now kicking off into a path that we wish to build together. It is an honor to be with all of you here in Portugal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, State Secretary, for this wonderful intervention. And as you know, the title of this focus session is Leadership Through Gender Equality in Sport and Dual Career, Effective Strategies and Future Directions. Well, it's a lot to cover in one morning, but for sure we will do it with the help of our high-level speakers. So we will split the morning into two sections. We will start with a focus on gender equality, and then we will have a focus on dual career in the second part of the session. Our first keynote speaker is Annemarie Phelps. She has many caps and is a real multitasker. She is the chair of the UK Secretariat and co-chair of the Global Executive for the International Working Group on Women in Sport, well known as the IWG, which will hold its next major conference, if I'm right, in Birmingham in July 2026. She is also a member of the EPAS Consultative Committee Bureau, and she represents the European Olympic Committee. She is a British former rower, as well as Vice President of the British Olympic Association and an Executive Committee member and Chair of the Gender Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Commission at the European Olympic Committee, the EOC. So please give a warm round of applause for Annemarie Phelps.
Excellencies, friends in sport, I want to start by taking you to 2044. Are there some slides? No? No? Okay. How old will you be in 20 years' time? Imagine we've come together in 2044 not to talk about the progress of equality or women's leadership in sport, but just to celebrate the immense power of our sector, to discuss how our sports, led by a diverse blend of accomplished leaders, can, with all of our support, do even more good, have more social impact, and contribute more to the health, wealth, and cohesion of our families, communities, and nations, more than it already does. Just imagine for a moment what this room would look like and feel like. Imagine we're not reporting on data and progress, we're telling a whole new story about exceptional leadership and unprecedented inclusivity. A world where all women and girls can thrive, where they can progress in their careers at the same rate as their male peers, and their voices are heard at the decision-making tables across sport. Imagine your daughters and granddaughters are there. So how can it be that we can only imagine a future like that? 2044, will we still be measuring and reporting on progress, wondering why the same interventions are still not working? If we stand back, it looks like we're doing okay. We are making progress in representation, but in almost every sector where power or privilege is a key factor, there is a resolute resistance to change when it comes to leadership. Even the executive director of UN Women, speaking at the United Nations General Assembly recently, had to point out that of the 133 speakers, only 9 were women. She reminded them that the UN as an organization and its membership have, to quote, professed loudly and repeatedly their commitment to equality, something that is central to the achievement of the UN SDGs. And yet only 27 of the UN member states have female leaders. I support her assertion that if we, the current holders of decision-making posts, do not take deliberate action, any commitments to progress and equity are worthless. We not only spurn the benefits of women's leadership, but we set the poorest examples to our young men and boys. So 30 years after our foundation, the International Working Group on Women in Sport still has a role to play. As a global network of networks, the IWG connects organizations that are committed to change, amplifying their successes and sharing what works. Our vision through sport is to contribute to a world where all women and girls thrive, by bringing people together to share and inspire change to the structures and values of sport globally. The IWG is committed to helping organizations like yours to find solutions, policies, and strategies that work through connections, insight, and advocacy. Right now, we're at a tipping point. Whilst our networks are telling us that leadership in sport remains a key battle area, surveys indicate that the global public are suffering from equality fatigue, and we're seeing programs to promote women's leadership in corporates being cut back. In March this year, an Ipsos report across 31 countries, including 12 from Europe, found that over half of Gen Z and millennials think that when it comes to giving women equal rights, things have gone far enough in their country. Almost half of them believe we've gone so far with gender equality, we're discriminating against men. And younger men are more likely to think that a man who stays at home is less of a man. In general, globally, the number of people who think that men are expected to do too much to support gender equality has risen from 2019 at 41% to 52% this year. So let me tell you 2 brief personal experiences from recently. I was traveling back from an event in Slovenia. No, I lied, Slovakia. In a taxi, And the taxi driver asked me what I was doing, and I said I worked in sports. And he said, "Why would you ever want to work in sports?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you're a woman. Why would a woman ever want to work in sport? You'll never have the credibility. You will never be as good as a man, because men are much better at sport." Only last weekend, I was on a Zoom call talking with a sport event. I'm not going to mention it, but it is nearing its 200. It's nearing its second centenary. This event has already agreed it's going to move to gender parity on the field of play. So they're beginning to discuss how they might achieve it within the timetable and the sort of competition program. One gentleman on the call said, "This is going to be really difficult. Gender equality. Do we need to rush it?" Quick as a flash, one of my colleagues unmuted her button and appeared on the screen, and she said, "Isn't 200 years long enough for you?" These microaggressions are daily for so many in our sector. I know that we all understand the benefits of sport and physical activity, and they've been mentioned so many times over the last 2 days. We all know that sport has a positive correlation with successful leadership across all sectors, especially for women. About 90% of female C-suite employees in the USA attribute their career success, for example, to their college sport experiences. And I don't need to tell you that to make sport more accessible to everyone requires deliberate action. It requires the implementation and monitoring of strategies and fair financial investment. And the time to invest resource in sport and physical activity is always now, even when, especially when economies are struggling. Because these are the times when women and girls are most impacted. This is the time we need to support and encourage our volunteers to continue to deliver at our sports clubs across the continent. Clubs that are affordable, local, and accessible to all. Because the European sport model relies on this pyramid. There are too many reasons not to, not least that sport is a growing economic success story in Europe. And women's sport and fans are amongst the biggest untapped opportunity for growth in our sector. According to a recent report by Wasserman, women globally control $31.8 trillion of discretionary spending. And by 2028, when we head to Los Angeles for the Olympic and Paralympic Games, women will oversee about 75% of global discretionary spending, making them the most influential consumer group in the global economy. We in sport have the opportunity to unleash a large, educated, and leadership workforce. We in sport can create role models for women and girls who will be the next generation of leaders, who can sit at the decision-making tables of any sector, but especially of our sector, to ensure every discussion involves a sustainable, gender-mainstreamed approach. I'm going to be honest here. There are still parts of Europe that think it's okay to elect an all-male board to run a national sports organisation. Governments need to look closely at the structures they're funding. Sports organisations should consider how and where women fit in. There are simple things we can all do, like ensuring that meeting times fit around family commitments, supplying fit-for-purpose equipment that doesn't damage high-performance athletes in training. It is 40 years since I gave up playing football. I was a rower, but I played football before. But it was only 4 years since the very first commercially available football boot, specifically designed for women's feet, has been available to buy. We also need to ensure that sports coaches understand the impact of training loads around female athletes' menstrual cycles. Today, it's estimated that only 8% of research in sports science and medicine is specifically related to women's physiology, biomechanics, and health. and 72% by contrast into men's. So let me conclude on a more positive note. Let's talk about what is working. I've already mentioned gender mainstreaming. This is an absolute must, an essential, low-cost investment, merely requiring the integration of a gender perspective into the preparation, design, and implementation of policies, regulation, and spending, which will promote equality and combat discrimination. Mainstreaming requires meaningful representation, though. So I highly recommend quotas, because quotas work. Women hate them, men hate them, but unless you trigger the change, the brakes will remain firmly installed on progress, because too few think it can be done. Last week, at a European sports seminar, I asked about 40 people, men and women, what the perceived barriers to gender equality in their organisation were. Now, I'm not claiming this was a scientifically representative group, but it was a structured discussion, and the responses were consistent and depressing. Why are women not leaders in sport? They're not recognised as leadership material. The current male leaders don't believe women have the competence and experience to make it as a leader in sport. There are just not enough women in sport. Women give up too easily. Women in my country, sport organisation, are just not interested in leadership. Across Europe, 45% of employees in the sports sector are women, but we are just not making progress at the leadership level. At national Olympic committees globally, only 4% of their leaders are female. And in the 27 EU countries, only 4 are women. With the announcement of the new sports in Los Angeles, there are now 5 presidents of Olympic international federations who are women, and none in the winter sports. And yet we know that quotas work. The European Olympic Committee has introduced a 30% quota in 2020, which transformed the candidate nomination list. And instead of 5 women being elected via the quota places, 7 were elected in their own right. France has legislated that all sports bodies must have gender equal boards. Croatia has mandated a 40% quota for its board and commission. And we've heard in the last 2 days here that many governments are following this route. Lastly, male allyship. This is critical. Even with increased representation, we're not seeing leadership roles going to women. And we know the problem. In the Ipsos report I mentioned earlier, 65% of people acknowledge that women won't achieve equality unless the men in their countries take action to support women's rights. So I appeal to those here, to all you men, to think about how you can not only support your daughters and your granddaughters, but also to be an ally for female colleagues in the workplace, for the women in the sports that you fund, by ensuring you question policies and projects, you support women's networks, insist on sex disaggregated data collection, that you decline invitations to all male panels, otherwise known apparently as manels these days. I've heard this new word. Set yourself out to be a role model yourself. Create an environment in which men and women work together. Speak out and remind doubters of the fact that women in Europe outperform men in educational attainment, that they make up half of the population, and that women's sport is the growth area of the future. Finally, I promise, the IWG will convene its quadrennial summit on gender equality in sport in Birmingham in July 2026. Please support your sports to be involved. Please come to and be part of it, sharing your policies and programs, what's worked in your country, and let's together amplify and accelerate change so we reach that imagined room before 2044. Thank you.
So I think, sadly, a lot of the information you gave us comes as no surprise at all to most of us in the room because we experience it all the time, we see it all the time as well. So I think there was a sound problem for those following the conference online at the start. So just to reiterate, you do have the option of having online questions, so please do put them in the chat because there aren't any so far. So instead, we will ask the room, does anyone have a question for Anna-Marie Phelps? And if not, I have several, so please do take the opportunity before I hog the floor with questions. So does anyone have a question? Just raise your hand. Please don't be shy. I'm looking around the room. Very quiet. You've been stunned into silence by the statistics, I think. No. So my question for you, as I'm going to take the opportunity, is in your own personal experience, what has it been like to reach this stage of being a woman in leadership? And do you feel discriminated against a lot?
Yeah, I was really lucky. So my sport is rowing. I was a world champion 100 years ago, well, in the last millennium at least. And my president of my federation at that time was a woman. She was the president of the federation for 24 years. And eventually I became her deputy chairman. So there was always a leadership figure for me to look up to. And so I've been lucky in that respect. But I do find sometimes I've been in situations where I will be leading a delegation, for example. I'm the vice chair of my National Olympic Committee, and I will have an assistant who may be male with me, and people will often direct the questions to them, and they will look at me and I'll answer the question. They continue to direct the questions to the man in the room. So this happens quite a bit, and you just sort of have to graciously try and insist on it. And I think it's a really important way of working.
So I can see no more questions online. So I've got another question for you. Unless anyone else in the room wants to raise their hand, please don't be shy. Yes, over here at the back row. Please, could you say your name first and maybe stand up so we can see you?
My name is Bruno Rodrigues. I'm here with the youth delegation. You may have seen us yesterday. My question is, and thank you first for your words. You have talked about the worrying trends among Gen Z and millennial men, and we have seen in the recent years a lot of quote-unquote influencers and celebrities that parrot misogynistic points of view, disguised as men rights or other sorts of speeches. What kind of work can we do to find good male influential figures that can inspire young men to fight for women's rights as well?
Thank you. Thank you so much for this question. I think these misogynistic views have always been there, but this new way of communicating openly, digital discussions, web, the open web, there's so many more opportunities now for marginal voices to be heard. And I think we have to counterbalance them. I think we don't want to get into a fight individually with people because it gives them more airtime. But we need to talk about how sport is growing in a way that's much more gender equal. We need to have more male allies who speak up, not for women's rights, but just about talking about how good women's sport is. Because, the easy thing is to say, well, the women are much slower at the 100 meters than the men, or, the women don't lift as heavy weights. But that's not the point. The point is that they are just as good sports people, that they are achieving just as good things, that they can contribute just as much to society and to their families and to a nation's well-being as any man can that has done sport in the past. So I think it's more about amplifying our voices, particularly for men to talk about when they've enjoyed a women's football match. Yeah, maybe the women don't hit the ball quite so hard, but actually their skills are often much better because of this. So let's celebrate the things that women do really well. And that doesn't detract from men's sport. It doesn't detract from the fact that men are really fast, and it's fantastic. We all love going to watch a really good men's football match.
Thank you very much, Anna Marie. So we'll have more opportunities to ask Anna Marie questions after the panel discussion now. If you'd like to take your seat, and I'm going to introduce the various guests on this wonderful panel that I'll be moderating. And the title is Solutions to Greater Leadership for Women in Sport, Overcoming Barriers and Building Bridges. So we've already heard from our first stellar lineup of panelists. We have Anna Marie Phelps over here. And maybe we can give her a big round of applause for being so brave for everything she said. So I'd like to invite to the stage now also Pauline Ekambi. Pauline is president and co-founder of Sportai Community and ex-captain of the French basketball team president. She's also the co-author of the book Ma promesse en héritage. Pauline, welcome. Big round of applause for her. So our next panelist, I know, is quite a hero within Portugal, Tisha Pinicheiro and beyond. And she's a former professional basketball player, currently a sports agent and vice president and head of women's basketball division at One Time Agency. Come to the stage. And finally, we're delighted to welcome André Seabra. He's the director of the Portugal Football School, the Research and Education Unit of the Portugal Football Association, and professor at Faculty of Sports, Porto. Welcome. So, as mentioned, we'll have time for questions afterwards. I have a few questions to start with. And my first one actually is to André. As the director of the Portugal Football School, what specific initiatives have you implemented to address gender equality in football education and management? And what outcomes have you observed so far? And if you want to speak in Portuguese, of course you may. Up to you.
Well, if you give me the opportunity to speak in Portuguese, of course for me it's more easy. Well, bom dia a todos.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to start by thanking for the invitation for the Portuguese Institute of Sports. It's an honor and a privilege to be here and to be able to share what has been the vision of the Portuguese Federation of Football regarding this topic, but particularly what has been the work being done by the Portugal Football School. Francine, let me say that it's very hard for me to talk about the topic because I have in the room the two people who are responsible for creating our school, the president of the Portuguese Federation of Football and the current Secretary of State of Sports, who are the two people who are truly at the center of the creation of the idea of this school. Before answering your question, it seems to me it's fundamental to explain a little bit what is the school, what is the Portugal Football School, what was the idea behind it, and what are the goals that we have, and how does the school serve the vision and the strategy of the board of the Portuguese Federation of Football. In 2017, Fernando Gomes, our president, created the school with the Minister of Education and the Minister of Science and Higher Education. And he highlighted that this school comes with three major purposes. The first one, to provide education and capacitation and qualification to the different stakeholders that are fundamental to improve sports in Portugal, which is not only coaches and referees, which is in general sports organizations all over the world have their focus on. These two figures. Currently, we have over 40 training programs for all these participants that are very important to have better sports in Portugal. The second goal, and not least important, and that truly is what makes the difference for when compared to other federations throughout the world, is the fact that we produce science within the Portuguese Federation of Football. Currently, we have 13 PhD students with scholarships funded by the Foundation for Science and Technology, which is the organization that promotes science in Portugal. Since 2017, we had 19 PhD students, over 50 master's degree students, and 40% of them are women.
The third goal, not least important, has to do with transferring knowledge. It's not enough to produce science. We need to make science go into the community. So these were the three purposes that guided the creation of this school, and that nowadays the major purpose of the school is to help the Portuguese Federation of Football to make its strategic plan real, because many of our strategies are being scaled at the national level, and in the background there is science. And let me highlight that strategically, the strategic plan that was launched up to 2030, one of its pillars has to do with increasing the number of girls and women in the pitch, in the pavilions, playing our modalities, our sports, but also a lot to be done in having more women in leadership positions in organizations. Now, trying to answer what the question by Francine, that is truly the topic that brought us here, is that in general, when I look at the school and trying to see the school responding to this question of bringing more women to leadership positions, normally I divide it in two dimensions. The dimension that has to do with capacitation through creating programs that might contribute to have more women who are qualified to reach top positions in the leadership of organizations, and then partnerships and collaborations that the federation wants to design. On the first dimension, since day one, there was the intention to create an executive program that could be enlarged to all the women that were not only specified to football, that they could participate in an executive training, which matches many topics that are decisive so that women can take leadership positions, contributing to that program with a process of mentorship that is pivotal, according to our opinion. Let me also tell you that within the strategy of the school and the board, we need the creation with our partners 20 scholarships so that women who play football in Portugal can go to the university, finish their degrees or finish their master's degrees. Here we add that concern as well. The third strategy within the dimension of capacitation, it would be to highlight that in training futsal coaches, the direction of the school also wanted to have a support in the of 90% in the tuition payment. We tested also, and very successfully, in our major feminine team, women's football team, during their training process for the World Cup. That was our first time. We had a women's team in the final of the World Cup, and during the stage, we created a program around topics on leadership and communication. So these are the three major strategies that we have within capacitation. Now, going to the second dimension, which is also decisive, I'll never forget what Fernando Gomes said in 2017 towards the ministers. And he said, and I quote, we need to bring universities and research centers into the federation and take the knowledge we have in the federation to the higher education institutions. What happens today is that we have connections with 23 higher education institutions with whom we develop training programs, short term ones, and master's degrees as well, and the PhD projects as well. These are real partnerships. So we designed a program that is going throughout the different institutions of higher education. And in each of these institutions, to each of them, we bring a player who studies at that institution, a coach who has been trained in that institution, and a manager of sports that was trained in that institution. And we present to the school community of that higher education institution a set of opportunities of employment, of uh, so that more and more women realize that in sports there are more opportunities for this involvement. And it's in these two dimensions that I would like to focus on, and I think I've used all of my time. And I'm sorry for my enthusiasm, but well,
It's great to have energy because we need energy and fight. Otherwise, we can't make a change. And one of the subjects which I think is very important for women in leadership, we talk about women in leadership, but women don't exist in a bubble. Women in leadership need male allies who are as passionate and determined as you and strategic in thinking. And of course, in your country, what you're putting in place, it's vital to make a change. So it's really good. I'm going to pick up on another point as well, which I think you've raised, which is important, which goes slightly along the lines Anne-Marie was mentioning as well, which is that when there's a financial incentivization, it makes a difference. So you mentioned a 90% reduced rate of fee. Yes, it makes a difference because when it comes to money, money talks. We all know that power lies with money. So if we want to make systemic change, gender equality across the board, but also in leadership, we need money behind it. So really, thank you so much for sharing this with us now. I'm now going to turn to Pauline over here, and I've got a question for you. I want to know, as former captain of the French women's basketball team, what were the main challenges you faced as a player, leader, and how have these experiences shaped your current approach to defending gender equality in sport?
Je vais parler en français. Good morning. I will be speaking in French. Good morning, everyone. Well, to start with, I was lucky enough to have a wonderful career within Team France as a captain for the basketball team, also in various clubs, and also I was pioneer because I received a grant at the NCAA that was in the 1980s. So that was the wonderful part that was brought forward thanks to sports. What happened afterwards? Well, I integrated INSEP, which is the National Institute for Sport and Performance in France. I was 14 years old. It was one of the very first promotion where you had the possibility to do sports and study. It was in France. It was basically a champion factory. This is what we call INSEP right now, the champion factory, forming all the future talents for France's sport. Back then, basketball, my sport, was also a feminine sport. So we had a number of women, and basketball was mostly about women in France. So it was a will from the chair and from the technical director back then who absolutely wanted to have a women team. They wanted to invest on women and have the very beginning of the professional league for French feminine basketball. So we started having only women around us. We had a woman coach, a woman staff, and slowly but surely, when we started structuring our sport, when media started raising interest and when money started flowing in, well, suddenly the man threw the women away and started investing the basketball women's sport, and the federation started investing in the 1980s on men more than on women, and slowly but surely women were going back in the shadow, yet women were actually contributing to the great result of feminine French basketball because they were winning a lot more medals than the men were. So, slowly but surely, because the French Federation was structured by man with man, and as we were saying, there is a lot of favoritism. They tend to promote each other. So they would move away women coach who were actually excellent in order to place their men who beforehand thought that coaching women was actually a punishment. Back then, they were all battling in order to have great positions in men's basketball clubs. But when there was a saturation, they would come to train women, but they did not have the right mindset. It was more out of opportunism. So, what were the challenges I was faced with? Well, of course, there was a lack of recognition, a lack of visibility for women. So, slowly but surely, we were not on the forefront, but maybe on the second range. And also, we had to keep on fighting gender stereotypes. And also, we had to fight against inequality of resources. You know, we've been talking about money, but let's remember that we are talking about public money, taxpayer money. My parents, my brothers, myself, I pay tax. And I do not believe that it is normal that we have so much inequality at that very level. And also, I have another example. In my first professional contract, I was 17 years old and I had a clause that prohibited me from being pregnant. That was in the 1980s, and you know we're in 2024 now. So it took over 40 years for this to change, and we are still talking about those issues and those topics. So we fought in order to gain the same rights, in order to gain recognition in our sport and for our sport. And we also fought in order to defend the condition of women basketball. And then there were also inequalities when it comes to resources and opportunities, but the main challenge was to build a sports career with other commitments that were also reality for many of us, for many women. And we know what the challenges are if we compare each other with the men. So all those barriers actually encouraged me to show and prove that women actually have their place in the sports elite. And this experience allowed me to understand that true change needs to lift visible barriers, but it means that we also have to break down the unconscious bias that prevent women from accessing leadership roles. So today I'm fighting for an authentic gender equality because I do believe that gender equality is a strength and it's very rich to make sure that we move forward.
A round of applause for that answer. I want to touch on just one point you mentioned at the end, which is very important for me, and not just for the whole of EPOS team and the Council of Europe, because we have a whole policy of gender mainstreaming within the Council of Europe. And something that we've done quite recently is bring in unconscious bias training. So this is what you mentioned, contre les préjugés inconscients. Apologies to the interpreters, I'm switching to French briefly. And unconscious bias training allows people to uncover their own biases that they have, and they don't even realize they're there. And I think it's really important to mention unconscious bias training. We had it within the consultative committee at EPAS, within the governing board of EPAS. We also work with the European Broadcasting Union in this area, and I think it can really make a difference because there are some biases we carry from youth, and we don't realize we have them. So I think it's a really good point, Pauline, that you mentioned there as well. I'm going to now move on to Tisha. If you can grab a microphone, Tisha. So as a Hall of Famer and one of the greatest point guards in women's basketball history, how do you see your role in mentoring the next generation of female athletes? And what impact does mentorship have on empowering women in sports?
Good morning, bom dia. I will speak in English. I think it's easier for me. And thank you so much for the invite. It's a pleasure to be here in my country to speak about women's rights equality. It's something that I'm very passionate about. To answer your question, I knew that my career as a basketball player was going to come to an end, and I started thinking about what can I do next to still stay close to the game of basketball, the game that I love, but also to continue to be an influence on the next generation. At the end of the day, basketball gave me more than I could ever imagine. Growing up in Portugal in a little town named Figueira da Foz, and to be able to have the career that I had, I felt like I owe it to the game and to the next generation to kind of pay it forward. So I figured that I didn't want to coach. I knew that for a fact. So at the time, there weren't too many women representing women and women that could empower women, women in a leadership role. So I just decided that I wanted to be an agent, so not just to represent our players, but also be a mentor and kind of show them the ropes how to transition from college to the pros. I feel like it's a big responsibility, not just because their careers are in my hands, but also because it's my responsibility to form them to be better professionals, to be better people. Something that I don't think all agents always have done. So to me, the most important thing is to talk to them about being on time, signing autographs, giving back to the community, something that is super important. You're going to make money, how to invest that money. Because sometimes agents, you just think that you have to get the best contracts for your players, but I think we wear a lot of hats. And one of them is also to talk about financial literacy, something that our agency is very passionate about. We are responsible to form good people, to form players that are also coachable, they are good teammates, and they are, just go out in the community. So that was my goal to continue to give back to the game and now be in a position where I can lead the team to also do their part and continue on to the next generation. So I think as a woman in sports, when you see it, you can be it. And to me, I actually had a woman that was my agent, but most of my teammates always there were males, representing them. Males that didn't even play sports. So I think being in this position where I actually have literally been in shoes and I can give advice by experience because I literally have been everything they're going to go through. I have been through it. I think it gives me an edge compared to other agents.
So that's touching on the real role models, and like the Gina Davis Institute in America. If you can see her, you can be her. I think that's a really important guide as well. I've got another question for you, Tisha, as well. What are your thoughts on the future directions for women's leadership roles in sports agencies and organisations? And I'm not going to go into comments yet on numbers, but I will do in a moment. What changes are necessary to increase the presence of women in these positions?
Well, I think that's what we're trying to figure it out, right? So, I think it starts with us women. I think sometimes we're our worst enemy. I think we sabotage ourselves because we don't believe that we are good enough. Society makes us think like that. Luckily, I was born in the '70s, but I had a family, parents that supported my dreams just like they did with my brother. So sometimes it starts at home, and sometimes it starts believing that we belong, we bet on ourselves. I betted on myself a long time ago because I went after my dreams and it worked out for me. So also another thing that is very important is to have males in leadership positions that believe in the women and they really believe they are the right person for the job. Not because they're women and it's a charity thing, but because they have the best resume and they are the right person for that job. My former boss and my current boss, they're both males, but they and I can actually give the example of something that just happened to me. I was with a sports agency for over 10 years, and I was approached by a new agency. Uh, and as soon as I realized they were trying to recruit me, my first instinct was saying, "No, I'm not leaving my agency just because I'm very loyal." So I think sometimes we as women we start thinking about everything that can go wrong instead of thinking about the things that can go right. So I immediately shut down the possibility of changing to a different agency because I felt responsible. What if I leave and this agency just starts not doing well? And sometimes we can think about it. I think women in general, we are very unselfish and we always don't put ourselves first. And sometimes you have to have good family members, a good circle of friends that sometimes they remind you who you are. And and I had that. So and then when I really went back and just started thinking about all the things why I should make that change, it just made sense. I'm going into a new agency where I have an opportunity to start my own women's division, and it's going to be my baby, and I can really put in my spill and everything that I want to do. But again, you have to have men that believe in you to hire you for these positions. My new CEO said, "Listen, you are the person that I want, so you don't have to give me an answer now. You take your time, and whenever you're ready, then you just let me know." So it took me 6 months to make a decision, but I'm glad that I did because I'm much happier and I feel like we do more for our clients in this agency that I did in the previous agency. But to really answer and summarize your question is really us believing in ourselves, but also have people that truly believe in us. And the other thing is to have companies marketing companies that invest in women. Again, not because they feel like it's a tax write-off or it's a charity case. We're not there anymore. It's profitable and it's a return. When you put in the money to invest in women, you're going to have a return. And this is what we need to do to have powerful men that believe that, when you put in, whether it's money, whether it is leadership, whether it is what it is into the women's sports, the return is amazing. And for me, like growing up here, I didn't have any male role models. I wanted to be like Magic Johnson. I wanted to be like Michael Jordan. And to know now that this new generation of girls, they have so many women that not just in basketball, but in tennis and soccer, in swimming, in rowing. I mean, there's so many sports where women are really thriving. And to have these little girls that now they can say, I want to be like her. It's super important.
Thank you. That's really inspiring. I think one point you touched on there that's also really important is the fact that investing in women across systemically, not just in sport, but in different sectors and in leadership, it's a smart business investment. That means that, how has a penny not dropped yet? I mean, this really has to start happening. So I think that's really important. The return on investment is massive. The potential market is massive. So if people want to make money, really start to think more about equality, investing in women in leadership. It's absolutely the way forwards. I have a question for you, Anna-Marie. Now, you have so many caps, as you know. We went through them at the start. And you're also a member of the Olympic Gender Equality Commission. And I'm wondering that in that role, how do you work towards gender equality in sports globally?
Is that one? Yes. So globally, I mean, the IWG is a global organization as well, and I also sit on the IOC and the ANOC Gender Equality Commission. So we really share a lot of best practice. I have to say, with my European Olympic Committee hat on, which is obviously one of the continental confederations, we meet as the five continents regularly, and we share best practices and information. And one of our most recent project was called Games. It was a Games consortium, which was an Erasmus Plus project. And that was fantastic, looking at women's leaders and trying to resolve what is, it's not an age-old problem, because when women's sport was very separate, there were plenty of women leaders leading women's sport. And as women's sport has grown and become a much more commercial and attractive basis, there's been many more men coming in and challenging at that leadership level. When women's sport was integrated into men's sport, it tended to sort of be integrated in with the male leaders staying at the top. We definitely saw this in Title IX in the US when that took place in the 1970s. There used to be loads of women coaches in women's programs, and they all became amalgamated, and the leaders were naturally seen to be the leaders of the men's sport division at all those colleges. So some of the work that we're doing in the Olympic space, obviously, at the EOC with, for example, Games Project, and it's really focused on women leaders. And traditionally, the solutions to that have always looked at how do you change the women so that they fit in? How do you give women the skills they need so that they can come to the table and be able to project their voices and be heard and fit in with the system? And of course, the whole point of women being around the table is that they bring what women bring to the table. They bring a different perspective. They bring the things that are important to them. And the solution is not to try and fix the women, but to try and make sure that the system can hear the women and the women can get into those positions. So the Games Consortium project really looked at three particular areas. They were both pathways for women, so helping them to have the confidence, giving them the skills that they might need, which is important in a different environment, but also structurally and culturally helping those NOCs to begin to think much more laterally about how they could provide changes and what they could do. And the 8 NOCs involved all had really different ways of looking at it and wanting to different aspects, depending on the maturity of them, how many women they still had in their NOC and things like that. There's been some amazing progress. The NOCs and their leadership had to buy into it. They had to part of the program. It ran for 18 months or so, and there's fantastic pool of actions which is available on the website and in hard copy that gives examples of all of these three main pillars that need to be faced if you want to try and make a change and make difference. But it does take deliberate action. It takes really investing time and resource into it and taking deliberate action.
So would you call that like positive discrimination? Maybe? How would you describe it?
I wouldn't call it positive discrimination. I mean, we don't want to get into a technical difference about the difference between equality and equity and all of that. But I think it's just about changing the systems that we have in place in sport to make sure that they encompass everybody, that they listen to everybody, that they're recognizing the difference that women bring to a decision-making table, the different experiences they have, and the different needs that they might have. And they may be some really simple things like different timings for training programs. They may be different kits. The number of national teams that traditionally had white shorts for men, and then when they have a women's football team, they put the women into white shorts. Just trying to explain that actually maybe sometimes it's less appropriate, and it's much neater if you just have a pair of red shorts or black shorts or navy shorts for the women's team. And the women's football team in the FA have changed that in the UK. And I spoke to Prince Faisal of Jordan when they were designing their kit recently, and we just said, maybe white shorts isn't so good. And he went, oh, goodness, we hadn't even thought of it. And they hadn't thought of it because they hadn't got a woman around the table making those decisions. So having those women around helps make decisions that are appropriate and they're good for everybody, the decisions that they're making.
Thanks, Emily. And I think the idea of clothes and I'm thinking about the Wimbledon white tennis outfit, for example. I mean, it's very difficult for women who always have to wear white. So I think it's good to have women around the table to discuss those issues. Before I'm actually going to take questions from the room and online now. But before I do so, I'm going to shamelessly plug the Council of Europe European Union joint project called All In Plus. It was mentioned by our Director General, Gianluca Esposito, right at the start. And I'm mentioning this project because it's been a really, really powerful project across 21 countries, including Portugal. And one of the main indicators of the All In Plus promoting greater gender equality in sport project is leadership. So we should have some data to be released on the 13th of February at the closing event in Luxembourg, and it will be streamed online, I'm sure, as well, about women in leadership across over 20 countries, including in Portugal. But what we really hope is that things have improved because we did the data collection process a few years back in 2016, and I'm going to read out the statistic because it's so depressing. I have to actually quote it. So, in the all-in previous round data collection, and based on data from the IOC, women only made up 6.3% of National Olympic Committee presidents, that's 13 out of 205, and 15.2% of NOC Secretaries General, 31 out of 205. So there is a long way to go, and let's see on the 13th of February if things have improved or not. So fingers crossed, because we don't want that situation to continue again. But the other issue that we have with this is what happens now with COVID as well. Perhaps the COVID has made it even harder for women to actually accede to leadership positions. So we have already 2 online questions. One is for you, Anna, but I think it's open to everyone, and then specifically for you. The first one is women who lead organizations now have 3 jobs. They have their profession, they have their family, and they tend to be organization leaders. Well, they're the only ones that have 48 hours in a day.
Yeah, 8 days in a week would be nice, I think, going back to the Beatles. Women do take on too much, and quite often they'll burn out. So managing time is, I'm a really bad example of this, really, because I do take on too much. You feel it's, as a woman, you feel it's slightly a duty if you're asked to do something to do it. You tend to have grown up. I think it's a problem with my generation. I think the younger generations out there will change. We're a sort of crossover. I'm the oldest one, I think, up here. I'm definitely a crossover generation of people who grew up expecting to look after families and to do the shopping and thinking about the meals and things like that. I'm a bit of a control freak in my kitchen. And I also want to have control outside of it too. So I think this will change with the next generations. And I think that it is much more likely that men and boys want to be part of their family, want to help bring up their children, want to be part of that change in generation.
Thank you very much. Andre, I have a question for you. So you've obviously made a lot of inspiration with your passionate speech at the start. So do local clubs have the logistical capacity to receive or increase the number of girls and women participating, i.e. infrastructures, playing fields, changing rooms, etc.?
É uma excelente.
Great question. Everything that's connected with the strategies for the Portuguese Federation, because its main mission is to bring a greater number of boys and girls for sports, which is beach football, futsal, and football. We are experiencing a common issue, which is that we truly have a scarcity of facilities for our own sports. There are efforts. The Portuguese Football Federation did an extensive survey vis-a-vis sporting facilities that are not being used. They are actually outdated, and we are making an effort trying to find different contexts that make it possible to fulfill our mission. But actually, this problem that Portugal faces in different sports, the scarcity of facilities, is something that happens also in other countries. We do wish to bring more practitioners for competition, but also for leisure, which is something that we are really passionate about, to bring more girls, more women, but that's an issue actually, the lack of facilities. But we do believe in this strategy, trying to understand that what happens in our country, having facilities that are not being used, also happens in other countries.
Not yet. I have a follow-on question to that. How can we make this issue a priority then to sports federations? What do we do? And that's for everyone. How can we make them realise that sports infrastructures at local level have to take into account women as well? Andre, I don't know if you want to answer that straight away or if anyone else wants to answer that. Tisha, maybe?
Again, it just goes back to the leaders, to the presence of the federations. The things in the United States is completely different. Everything is the sports are played in schools, which I think also makes everything easier for the parents as well, for the kids, because sometimes they play different sports and they don't have to pick one sport. But I think it starts with our leaders in the federation, in the presence of the clubs, to fight to continue to have these infrastructures for the people be able to, for the athletes to be able to have good conditions, because sometimes if you practice in ways that don't really have good conditions, sometimes you're just gonna lose the love for the game and you're gonna stop because so it just goes again back to the leaders and to make sure that everything, at least we are fighting to have things the way that they should be.
Who did you think that?
I just say that I think it will become not just the right thing to do, but actually an economic factor and a sporting factor. At the last Women's World Cup, last Soccer Women's World Cup, 33 of the top women players were out with ACLs. And that's partly about them not having the right kit and the right boots. It's partly about the fact that we don't understand the training programs properly for women. It's partly because they haven't got the right kit and the right boots for their weight and their everything else. So all of these, it's going to become an economic factor as well as a nice to have the right sort of conditions and the right facilities for women to train in. And it's really important if we want to grow women's sport. We want to grow the economy of women's sport, which is going to keep your countries and your communities healthy and lower health costs and all the other things. There's a real economic imperative for actually addressing this that I think we need to keep talking about.
Thank you. So now I'm looking towards the room. You were very shy earlier, so please don't be shy this time. We have a fabulous line of panelists over here. Oh, could we just get you a mic so we can hear you on the online as well? And maybe introduce yourself first, if that's
Of course.
okay.
So my name is Luis Carvalho. I represent the Federation of Squash. So it's a new sport in the Olympics. But we have a gender equality active. We have a president that is a woman, OB Sina Wiltris, and we have programs for the gender equality. The problem that we have here is that, as you said, money talks. It's easy to say, do this, do that, and the other thing, others, but we are not the Portuguese, the Federation of Football. They are doing a great job, okay? But the question that I have is, what's your budget? And another thing, are you ready to work when you go to the universities? And we are living in a country of football. Are you ready to take another federation with you to show another sport? I'm more than sure that all of the rest of the federations here will think the same. It's easy to do things when you have money. Of course, it's easy to waste the money, and you are not doing that. You are doing a great job. But we need to use the money to all other sports. It's not easy to say, again, do this when in Portugal, the program that supports the gender equality, Programa Nacional de Porto para Todos, it's not still open for the year of 2024. Today, as I remember, it's 10th of October. We have no budget for that. We are working with our budget. We have Women's Week. We have the squashing femenino. We have everything, but money talks. So the question for you is, are the Portuguese Federation, what's the part of the budget that you use for this? And are you ready to take another sport with you when you go to the university? Because we are doing that, but we don't have money for that. Okay, thank you very much.
Andre?
Muito obrigado pela questão.
Thank you. Thank you. Very simple to answer. Let me tell you why. In the beginning, I started by explaining what the school meant and what was the message that the Federation took on before the Ministry of Education. If we want to improve sports, we must bring higher education institutions into the Federation and to do the opposite, to bring the knowledge that the Federation has into higher education institutions. There's no money necessary. We need strategy, we need vision, we need to draw bridges between municipalities, universities, hospitals, health units, all the organizations that are implementing their strategies. Listen to this also. We challenge the most known business and economics school of the country called Nova to work with us on a set of training programs. The challenge came from us, the Federation, to Nova. The director said immediately, we don't have a sports program, but we're all in. That's how we started. 3 years later, Daniel Traça came to the city of football, the home of the federation, saying that the relationship is perfect. We would love at our main MA, which is in management, to create a major in football business. And the first thing that the board of the Portuguese Federation said, don't do it in football business. It's not just sports, it's sports management, not football business. We must encompass all sports, not just football, thereby leaving a major in sports management of Nova SBA and the Portuguese Football Federation. You get 60 students for each major. So their thesis specializing in sports management. So we went to some of the other federations that are here: basketball, handball, track and field, Paralympic, Olympic committees, trying to bring them in trying to foster the creation of opportunities, not just for women, for men, but also for women, bringing them together into this notion of training. We can do it without money. Leila March is sitting right here. She's the vice chair of the Paralympic Committee. And I sent her a text. We must discuss after this session. Okay, Leila, we have 4 students of Nova SVE that want to do their master's thesis with the Paralympic Committee of Portugal. Truly, this depends on the vision and strategy of the people who are in charge of sports federations. Only by bringing everyone together, municipalities, hospitals, federations, will we be able to promote sports in Portugal. Let's do it together, and let's bring the squash federation. We did so with the paddle federation, so that together we can bring more women to sports in positions of leadership and management. Thank you. I do apologize about my enthusiastic manner of communicating.
Thank you very much, Andre. It sounds like your questions provoked a commitment. We've all heard it and it's been streamed. So we hear that squash now will get support. So that's good to know. More questions from the room. And again, really don't be shy. Not to hear your voices, not just mine, asking the same questions. So anyone brave, really raise your hand high if you have a question for me.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Please, the lights are blinding you, so if you can introduce yourself and ask your question.
Marie Porchet from the Center for Sport and Human Rights and also part of the Youth Initiative. So I have a question for Anna Marie Phelps, but it would be also interesting to have other panelists' input. We're seeing an increase in sports sponsors, marketing and communication campaigns around gender equality and women in sports. There are a lot of very interesting initiatives giving actual voice to athletes, female athletes, but that can also be sometimes seen as a very tokenistic approach. And I'm wondering, what is your opinion and how do you see the role of sponsors, broadcasters, media in truly enhancing women's leadership in sports? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gosh, I think that anything that can put women's sport on the front page, make it seen, is a good thing. You know, there's no news is bad news often in these situations, and you know, the one thing we must do is never assume that everything about women's sport is perfect, that every sportswoman is an angel who's not going to stray. You know, we look at the way footballers behave and male footballers, we put up with an awful lot, and we should treat our sportswomen the same way. So we should just be careful that we don't apply different standards to women's sport that we do to men's sport. Women need money. Women's sport needs investments. So I think it's a good thing that women's sponsorship is there. I think the issue comes when sponsors want those women to behave in a way that's not authentic to themselves. So to make sure that they've got their voice, that they're speaking up for things that they really care about. And sometimes they may be around gender equality and sometimes they may not. So I think it's incumbent on us as sports organisations to make women feel comfortable with being themselves, being able to turn down sponsorship if the profile of that company doesn't suit their values, but equally to allow them to express themselves in whatever way they can. And we're seeing more of that. And I think that there are a number of sportswomen, and particularly in football now, certainly in my country, I'm sure in your country, that are beginning to be household names because they have a personality. So let's not hold women to different standards that we hold our male football players or male athletes to. Let's make sure that we raise the standards across all of our athletes in terms of their ethics and morality.
Really, just to say, isn't that something that's very difficult to combat? The holding women to different standards is something that happens in every sector, in every sphere. I can't think of anywhere where actually we're not held to a different standard in terms of how we're judged and how we speak, how we look, how we dress, everything. So it's a huge challenge to make a societal change, sorry to be provocative, to make that change happen actually in sport as well. Because, and just to mention again, this All In Plus project, we're doing media sensitization, we're working with the media, trying to encourage them to think about the way they report on women in sport and not ask immediately, how's your pregnancy going? Or, don't you have children or things like this. So just bouncing back on that.
Yeah, I think this is moving on quite quickly. The IOC also have excellent media guidelines, but they're a little impenetrable. There are huge amounts of them. You go through what is quite a narrow, slim booklet, but actually the number, if you were to click on every link to every bit of advice and whatever, it would take you as part of several months to get through it all, understand it, and apply it to your media agency. So it is difficult, but I think it will change, and I think sport, above everyone, has the opportunity, above all other sectors, has an opportunity to really show that women do the same thing on the field of play. They have a different game. They play sport differently. They bring something different to the table. But ultimately, what they're doing is helping to contribute to this incredible sector that has such a massive social impact. So we do have an opportunity to change the way people think, to change the way that the media looks at sport and sportswomen. And we can do that with the help of the association, the national associations of our sports, and making sure that we do help educate the media in those things and allowing women to be themselves.
Thank you very much. I don't know if any of the other panelists want to add something quickly.
Well, I wanted to add something just because every year that I try to negotiate, let's say, a shoe deal for some of my clients, every time, let's say Nike, for example, every year I hear the same thing. Our budget is very limited. Our budget is very limited. Just this year, Caitlin Clark, I'm sure you guys know the name, she signed a $28 million Nike deal allegedly for 8 years. And that's unheard of on the women's side for basketball. Just a couple of days ago, Juju Watkins, she's still a sophomore in college, she just signed also a record-breaking deal with Nike. So I think these opportunities are coming. Also because when you look at the WNBA, it's not fair, and it's true. I don't like to compare the WNBA to the NBA. I don't think it's a fair comparison, but I do compare the WNBA to the WNBA. Now in 27 years, this is the first year that we really have receipts. The attendance is up tremendously. They are moving to bigger arenas to be able to have more fans. The viewership is up 170%. So it's the merchandise sales are up. So all of those marketing opportunities come because the women are being seen, are being talked about. We also have social media, something I didn't play with. So now the players can actually advertise themselves. And also the WNBA is about to sign a $2.2 billion TV deal, which is unheard of. So at the end of the day, people are finally catching up to what I've known for a long time, that women can play. We put on a group product. It's fun to watch. It's competitive, and I'm talking about basketball because obviously that's my lane. But I can just speak for everybody that this is a moment. It's not a movement. We are here to stay, and obviously it's a great investment to go into the women's sports. So to answer your question, yes, marketing deals are increasing, and I think it's just going to continue to go up.
Thank you very much. I think we've run out of time for the panel, which is terrible. I think if we speak all day, and we still haven't solved the issues. But what I'm going to propose is we're going to have a coffee break now. So please do grab the panelists during the coffee break and ask them as many questions as you like. But don't leave the room yet, because I want to announce something very important. There is a fabulous Portuguese initiative called the New Leaders Program. Portugal for a more equal sport. And the New Leaders Program is a training and mentoring program aimed at young leaders up to 35 years old in the field of sport who wish to develop their leadership skills, integrating equality between women and men as a priority and the good governance agenda within their sports organizations. The program includes workshops, mentoring sessions, and a final conference. And there are posters which can be seen outside, and these are the mentees projects from the first and second editions, which were held in 2023 and 2024. And during the break now, we also talk to some of the mentees who will be next to the posters during the coffee break. And just to say, the new leaders is promoted by the Portuguese Olympic Committee with the support of Olympic Solidarity and is based on a collaborative partnership between the Portuguese Institute of Sports and Youth, the Citizenship and Gender Equality Commission, and the Portuguese Platform for Women's Rights. We're coming straight back at 11:20 to talk about dual careers. Before we do, a big round of applause to the panelists.
dois, três. Dois, três, teste, som. Dois, dois. Dois, três, teste, som.
Ei, ei. Tô. Ei, 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 ei. Tá cá, tá cá. Dois, três, quatro, cinco, seis, sete. Ei, ei, ei. Está-se bem. Está perfeito agora. Dois. Dois, três, teste.
Como pronta, Joana, como...
have 700, and you have 200, over 1,200 by the end of this year. If in L2 you see that we had in 2 Olympic periods, we had to compare the data of them. We did it. Another figure that we wanted was the number of absences in school. We knew they would increase a lot, so we had 100,000 absences in school. We will look further ahead. Increased to 623, that we have 100,000 of absences, and in the second year we have only 288. This was a brutal effort for the program to include these athlete students. Another situation that makes me quite joyful and fulfilled is that we reached gender equality. We started with 9 girls in 2016, and I said this wasn't right. We needed more girls in sports, and in 2020 we had we 250, and now we ended the year with 500. We involved to 40%, but I'm not 100% fulfilled. We want to reach the 50%. This is the big challenge for WAR. Another question that we do is, what is our response? We have strategic measures to provide an effective response to a high number of athletes with such high demand in terms of pedagogical monitoring. We have 3 situations that are fully detailed: the formal and structural support, but more and more customized, more and more anticipating the scenarios that we identified in May from the previous year in order to have customized responses for each student. The second one is to reinforce and generalize the friendly environments where, and you can see this in the left side diagram, we have the 3 domains. This is a holistic model, a Portuguese model created for the Portuguese student athletes from the data that we have gathered. In the sports sector, in the school sector, in the family sector, we have now 23 psychologists working in these support networks that are so important for the athlete students. And we need a friendly environment here. And on the right side, you see that through different stakeholders participating here, we need to reinforce this commitment, because in Portugal it's mandatory, so that any sport athlete students to be have the participation of the parent for the commitments during the year. If they don't meet them appropriately, because they have many more rights, they will lose the status of student athlete if they don't comply with these requirements. What are our strategic actions for the future? We have 8. I won't have the time to name them all. I gave the organization the detailed PowerPoint where you have them all in detail. But if you allow me, I will focus on number 2 and number 3. These actions are important because number 1, as is that we do a previous articulation for anticipation of the school agendas of the students to realize who is ahead of us. Do we have someone who's going to the Olympics, to the European Championships? Yes, we have in Noir, we have Paralympic and Olympic athletes. Ribeiro, Beatriz in the Paralympics, we have them there. And this management of the agenda to red flag the exits, is to pre-prepare the plans, and this is the solution that we have. Also, knowing the scenarios. This is also a wire creation that has to do with identifying the most determining factor, the factor that will create more constraints in this conciliation process. So we have 6 identified scenarios, and they result from the actions of our research action purpose in the different schools we have throughout the country, and also the European research that was made. In the scenario 1, we have decided the higher education and the course. We are going to start a pilot process here The second scenario is to define options for personalized study plan. Three, prioritize agendas and forecast individual pedagogical conciliation plans. Four, manage academic assessments. Five, improvement and sustain health and well-being. And six, manage financial resources. If you have a student that we typify as scenario three, who is this student athlete? You will miss a lot of classes. So you will be in European or World Championships, go to the Olympics. So you will be for a long time absent from school. Let me give you an example. Our girls from the national under 17 team that were in Sweden in the final stage of the World Cup, the ones were there supporting them, helping them to prepare for the final exams on the secondary school. So we need an individual conciliation pedagogical plan. The student cannot do here, he will do there or another place. But with support, remote support, in-present support with the pedagogical team that works on these plans. This is the WAR environment. Of course, we have fantastic results. 15 minutes wouldn't be enough to go to talk about the success cases that we have. These are some amongst many. What to say where I'm here with Nazim in the Cristiano Ronaldo Academy? What to say about a coach from an 18 that launches in the Champions League three players, and they are who are student athletes. We are very proud of it, and they finish their secondary school. We are very proud. In the middle image, you have Antonio Casalino. Those who don't know him, ask Google it and see the videos. It's amazing. It's a prodigious talent that had a great. The single man dancer that won different championships. He finished his secondary school in War with a mark of 18 out of 20 in Libya. When he was 18, he became a solo artist in this company in this troupe in Munich. Jorgita Ferreira, that small girl on the right side. She was four-time world champion in the year where she closed and finished her secondary school, and she accessed the architecture University of Porto, faculty of Porto. I'm sorry being so aggressive, but these results of the UAS in the last school year are brutal. I invite you to look at this exponential growth. We beat all records in 23-24 with the hardest scenarios, with 100,000 absences of school. We increased the number of students, 1252, with over 300 clubs involved, 152 federations involved, over 358 sports tutors that articulate the federations with the teachers. Please take a look at the sports results. 58 world podiums, 337 European podiums, over 2,500 participations in international competitions, 224 national calls to national teams. Two, and please take a note of those the number of absences. I'm completely convinced that if it weren't for the action of this WAR model in Portugal, we would have had an amazing dropout. The rate of dropout in Portugal was zero, zero. That's why we had these results, and we have contributed here because we would have either drop out from school or drop out from the sport. And we achieved this, but the cherry on top is that we did this three 3,800 and 923 pedagogical supports, but almost 1,100,000 psychological support sessions. To prioritize agenda, to manage anxiety and demands of performance both at school and in sports. But we are very proud that we closed the year with 96.10 academic achievement rate, above the national average of those who are only students. And we finished with 800.06 rate of students with positive classifications in all subjects. This amazing. As you can see, I'm truly in love with this project. 8 years ago, I think it's no longer love, it's madness. But it's a sweet madness. I want to tell you and I want to share with you a quote that makes the 25 heads of schools very proud. The 25 study rooms that we have in the schools that work with the councils of class, with the 23 psychologists. And now, as a public thank, I would like to ask our colleagues from the project to stand. Eu Seco, Luís Deus, João, and with them, and I would like to thank all the WAR teams. We have a sentence, a quote for us. We are all WAR. This is how we close this. So teachers know us. Everyone knows us. We are all WAR. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Vitor Pradella. I think, as you'll all agree, it's a very inspirational program, and we have in EPAS sharing of best practice initiatives. And I think this one can certainly be a sharing of best practice initiative from Portugal on dual career for other member states. Thank you so much. So our next panel discussion will be on navigating dual career in sport, proven strategies and future pathways. This will be moderated by Laura Capraniccia. Now, she has got many caps, as many of the women we've had today and men, and she's the European Athlete Student Representative of the EPAS Consultative Committee. She's a university professor of sports sciences at the University of Rome for Italico, and she does many more things as well. So big round of applause to Laura, who'll be moderating the next session.
Thank you. Thank you, authorities, organizers, delegates, and participants on site and online. I would like to summarize the topics because it's a topic that has been around for a while, but some of you might not be very acquainted with it. So I will just shortly say that in 2004, the European Commission launched the European Year of Education in and through sports, combining sports and education. In 2007, there was the white paper on sport. 2012, the guidelines for the dual career of athletes. And from 2014 on, there are the Erasmus Sport Project. This year, the network I represent as president celebrated 20 years of anniversary, and the network is a network for educational institutions, sport bodies, and we have a very good relationship with policymakers and authorities on this issue. The network organizes annual conferences. This year we celebrated its anniversary in Katowice, in Poland. Next year will be in Zagreb, Croatia. And for 2 years, we had a conference in Portugal organized by one of our, I would say, member. And we also have online cafes because while conference is for members and policymakers and so on. The cafe is for everybody, for students, for whoever is interested in hearing the voice of a dual career expert and athlete. But let me say one thing. In 2021, dual career has been enlarged also for other sports persons. So coaches, referees, physical trainers, sport managers, and so on, which means that now we have the opportunity to include all the sport family in the dual career discourse. Now, the other thing we heard about the importance of research. I'm coming from sports sciences. When you don't have number, you don't have a phenomenon. You have, so we really foster the research. We have a Benny Penny scholarship for young researchers, but let me tell you that in the last years, we had a European discourse on sport, which is substantiated by 3 systematic literature review, one on the European project, because the Erasmus Sport project are very important to develop connection, partnership, and scholarship and outcomes. So if you are novel in this area, don't reinvent the wheel. Go to the portal of the European Commission because there are lots of tools to educate parents, to educate coaches. Really, there are lots of tools you can use. And the other thing that we have projects. Outside, you will have the flyer of 7 projects as is in, but there are others more. So you go to the portal and you can get more information and more ideas because the new frontiers, in my opinion, I can just give you some idea, is the sport person not only as an athlete but also as a worker because sport performance, best achievement in some sports are in later life, and most of the athletes need to support their everyday life through work, not being full-time athletes. So this is one new frontier. And so not only as athlete, but also as sport person, look at the referees, and look at the sport managers, and so on. Finally, it is important that Europe takes the lead because thanks to Portugal, we have a connection started with Brazil. And Brazil started recently a network on dual career and is very active. I've been invited to the 6th symposium and it was wonderful. So I really ask all of you to be actors in this area. And so only one thing before I present all these friends, panelists, it's please be active, engage, produce science, produce action and projects, because dual career does not belong to an organization, does not belong to one network, it belongs to all of us, it's culture. And in this regard, as a university professor, I included dual career and gender issues in my master level classes for sport managers as well as for coaches. And I think that only synergies we can have advancement of European leadership in sport culture. So thank you a lot. And now we'll introduce you the panelist. So the first panelist is Duarte Nuno Fernandez Lopez. We heard of the wonderful program in 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 health in Portugal, but you don't know that Portugal has national law. Not all the country have national law. Portugal has a national law, and in 2019 they improved their national law. So we have to take this country as one of the country most advanced in dual career. Then we have Jabri Zeman, and we know her from the past days, and she is a well-known champion in judo, but she is also lifestyle athlete manager at the National Institute of Sport, INSEP. And she was one of our panelists in the cafe. Then we have Sofia. Then we have Sofia Ramalho. She is from Benfica basketball female team manager, and she is also she participates also in the Timeout 2.0 project. So it's a very good project from the International Basketball Federation. And so, welcome, Sofia. And we have Andrei Pigeon, who is the communication project manager at the European University Sport Association. He's very active. He's very active in dual career project as well. And then we have Andy Pierre Martin, and he is a professional surfer. One of our panelists in the Ask Cafe. So I would start with Duarte. So you have a general knowledge regarding many support systems for dual career in Europe. And you also listen the keynote from Vitos on the high performance project. Now, how do you significantly consider the Portuguese sports system has benefited from the standpoint of athletes, coaches, referees, clubs, federation, and parents?
Thank you. Thank you. Oh,
Yes.
it's working. Okay, thank you very much for the invitation. I hope that I'm here as a dual career expert and not as a chief of staff of the government. And saying that is, I'm saying that because nothing that I will say here will compromise our government. I will pass now to Portuguese. Obrigado, bom dia a todos. Quem ainda não
Thank you all. Pleasure to be here and to discuss a subject that is quite dear to me, which is dual career. I had the privilege of working with the group of experts with the C when they published or started with the guidelines. After said experience, it was also quite interesting to work alongside the network, alongside our friend from Sweden, is Bengtsfilius, Benny Bellius, that's the proper name. And then with Laura, we've put together in Portugal twice the Dual Career Conference. On the other hand, it's a pleasure to be here with such interesting people from a sports standpoint, but also from dual career field, namely from university sports, which is always a pleasure to share the stage with these amazing people. Now to your question. There are many advantages to the sports system. It does not take advantage of it, but it takes some benefits from it, especially as the units that we have in Portugal, because it is properly distributed, geographically speaking. In the 25 or 26 schools, there is support spread throughout the country, and our clubs, our federation, athletes, and their families can actually take advantage of the assets connected to it. There is a problematic that is known, especially in research, that has to do with the athletic profile. Some athletes are, well, just athletes. And the fact that they are just athletes brings a lot more problems that one might imagine. For example, the rugby athlete associations uh, s- uh, says the following: You play rugby or rugby. You are not rugby, you know? So we must all be more than just the sport we play. Dual career takes advantage of the other side of an athlete's career. We do have many athletes who work exclusively on the athletic side of things with no more things in mind. But being advised and continuing with their academic path, this might be beneficial for sport also. When you focus on an area alone, when it doesn't work or it fails, that's an issue, that's a problem, and it's likely to happen. So I think that it's clear for all that it's quite beneficial to have a dual career standpoint. Just like Vitor said, the dropout is not that extensive, but it goes both ways from the athlete point of view and from the student point of view. So this brings huge benefits for the athlete itself or themselves. We will have an athlete with proper academic qualifications. Therefore, they will have a greater contribution to society. And it's also an asset for families because the families knowing that that nephew, that son, that daughter is being properly monitored, they get greater freedom because they get some autonomy and they can decide accordingly. I didn't want you to dwell on it, but let me debate the opportunities of communication between systems. Let me just get a sip of water. Usually, and we have a lot of managers here, associations, clubs. Usually, clubs are not communicating properly with the school. And there lies the potential of development, especially in the region. The fact that you have a UAR, which is the unit that has been mentioned, and they ask for the following items. Who is our focal point and whom do we address if the athlete is not getting proper results at school? This improves the network. I will rest here, and then the rest of the questions I will answer them following.
Now, Jeffries, as a you are being an athlete, and now you are working on the lifestyle athlete manager at INSEP, and you are in charge of the holistic development of the athlete. So, from your career, how would you contribute to the long-term success and well-being of the athlete, which is a hot topic, the well-being of the athlete? So, and what is your the challenges that you had when you were athlete, and how they are going to be solved for the next generation?
Déjà, merci beaucoup pour. Thank you. First of all, let me thank you for the question and answer in French. Throughout my career as an elite judo practitioner, I had a number of challenges to overcome. Now, these are challenges that athletes who are within the INSEP Institute have to face, of course. I don't want to go over every single challenge. There are three main ones I've made note of. First of it is being a sort of a act within your own project. This is what Victor was saying earlier. What do we mean by having a say on your career or your project? It's ensuring that the athlete has a proper say on how their careers develop. And this is what Duarte was saying earlier. We emphasize the fact that athletes are not only elite athletes as such, but they may also be a student, they may be a mother or father with children, and they have personal, professional ambitions and projects. This is why we have this whole idea of a dual career.
and why research is being done on this, and we're trying to enlarge this within the INSEP Institute to a life cycle project, which is much broader, more encompassing. We want to ensure that the athlete is at the heart of their own project or career. And the second point is we want to provide them with help with regard to sports supervision. We want to ensure that the coaching side of things is brought into play. Now, despite accompanying them with their careers and projects, and this has been given more and more importance, the IOC's been looking at this and has developed 5 recommendations encouraging sports movements to create systems with this in mind. This having been said, we still realise that coaches and directors of elite centres are perhaps sidelining the athletes' own projects and ambitions to focus mainly on the sporting side of things. But I think it's something that we need to bear in mind. We need to ensure that the coaching side of things is properly involved in this. The third challenge is changing your careers, moving to a new career. Now, whenever we change careers, whenever we change the structure we're working in, of course, this can create some disruption. There are questions that you may ask yourself, and this is the same for athletes or elite athletes as well, who spent the whole career practicing judo or surfing or basketball, as we heard earlier, and then all of a sudden they start asking exactly what they want to do, what they can do after that. And this is why we need to come up with solutions at this level. Now, what are we doing within the INSEP Institute? Well, we have a specific unit within INSEP, which has 4 accompanying persons for such projects. I'm one of them. And we have been trained in different areas, in particular with regard to interviews. And we're also trained in questions relating to professional and personal management, so we can help these athletes to fully identify and express what their views and priorities are and what their projects are, and to be at the heart of them as well. And Duarte was mentioning also the importance of being in touch with the heads of the different sporting poles within the INSEP Institute. We have 19 sports federations covering around about 20 sports disciplines in INSEP, and we are constantly liaising with the representatives from the different sporting poles. And we want to accompany the athlete throughout their career, throughout their project. We want to accompany throughout the calendar year, but we also want to think ahead to 2 or 3 years' time, of course, with the Olympic Games on the horizon, and we want to think in the longer term. And we want to also identify periods where there can be some friction or tension. And in the presentation just now made by Victor, he was saying that you need to, of course, second guess or be aware of when there are such difficult periods that are coming up, and that's what we're trying to do within INSEP. So we know when the athlete will be going to European or World Championships or the Olympic Games, and this will be a very difficult period for them. Now, the last point with regard to moving to a new career, the 4 accompanying persons within the INSEP are also regularly liaising with our colleague who works within INSEP and whose task is to create links with companies, businesses, and we work regularly with our colleague and create what we call immersion programs where athletes will be able to carry out an internship, if you like, or perhaps not an internship, but spend 1 day or half a day in different companies. And the most recent example of this is an athlete I've been supporting for the past 2 years, who joined INSEP 2 years ago. Well, 3 weeks ago, he spent some time at the Decathlon sports store because he wanted to find out exactly what sort of jobs there were there at Decathlon. And it's an opportunity to think about what sort of things they can do once they finish their career as an athlete. It's also an opportunity to identify exactly what the different systems in place there are. In France, for instance, if you're a salary worker, for instance, sometimes in France it's possible to have a training account within your company, so you can actually carry out training through that. And there are also systems open to elite athletes in France, and athletes who are undergoing sort of training can be put on this list. It's an interministerial list, if you like, and it opens up rights to undergo training to pursue a new career. And last but not least, with this in mind, athletes also have an opportunity to be put in touch with the psychological unit of INSEP. It's quite important, really. because when you start asking questions about what you want to do with yourself afterwards, and you need, it's useful to talk to a psychologist about this. And we have identified a course that, from this point of view, the psychologist has an important role to play, and we do encourage athletes to get in touch with the psychological unit of ITSEP. That's, in a nutshell, is what I wanted to tell you. I hope I didn't speak for too long, but I wanted to give you a brief view of what we're providing within the INSEP Institute for Elite Athletes.
Thank you, because you contributed also with the idea of synergies between federations and athletes. So it's and coaches. So it's and also you mentioned the education of tutors, which are very important in this, which is a very important issue. Now, Sofia Ramallo. So, how has your tradition from player to team manager influenced your approach to supporting athletes nowadays in managing their dual career? And what lesson you have learned and applying for these players in your current role?
Boa tarde a todos. Em primeiro lugar, obrigada.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. It is also important as being a woman to be in these moments. To answer that question, and starting by what Duarte mentioned, I'm going to tell my personal story of what happened to me. In my time, a long time ago, let's say, there was not there wasn't so much information as we have now, and the information that we can give to our youngsters. I did my degree in physical education and sports. I finished my fourth year, but by the fifth year, I had the chance of being professional of basketball abroad. And because of the lack of information, I gave and I focused only on sports, which is something that is quite happens quite often. It's less frequent nowadays. There's less dropouts in sports, especially in women's sports, which is already a different topic. If you go to the women's side, it's more serious. And this transition of mine of being an athlete, of going through that experience, makes me have a more direct contact with my athletes. I am able to be more informed on what are the solutions that exist for the problems that they feel many times. And it is true that the program is fantastic. The program of WILE is amazing. It's a pity that it's not included in all the schools and universities, because this is one of the topics that causes more constraints, because many times there is no flexibility from the university, from certain teachers, to understand that the student is also an athlete and who has his job as an athlete in the club, for example. What I want is to create a connection of trust, so that people know my story a little bit. I've been in their shoes. I've I want to try to find a solution so that they are prepared, especially in terms of logistics. The clubs should also realize the importance that athletes follow their studies. The dual career is not only a matter of studies and sports. Nowadays, there are many professional athletes who end up having a second job. In my team, that happens. So there's an effort from my side to try to arrange for the schedules so that they can make this conciliation between these two jobs. In the women's side, this is even harder. It's not easy nowadays to live only on sports. So there is this need of having a second career, a second job. And basically, that's it, to be there, to help as much as possible, to be informed, to try and find the solutions so that you can really do the job. It's not easy, but it's possible.
Thank you for inspiring mentorship in this regard. And now I ask Andrei, who is also a member of the consultative committee and is very much involved in university sports, in organizing events and so on. So, what are the unique challenges university athletes face in managing their career, and how does EUSA, who organizes big events, address these thoughts in its programs and projects?
Laura, for the question. And although the question might seem very straightforward and simple, it's of course very complex. We heard from two athletes now what are their personal experience, but also what the institutions are doing. We heard great example from Portugal where they have the national law and program. I represent European body of 40 different countries. Over 1,000 universities take part in our events. So my answer, if I would be direct, I don't know. But of course, there are great best or good cases both on the EU level. It was mentioned already before by you. The EU guidelines on dual career is a document and recommendations how to do something like Portugal did. Then we have the national programs, and let me, of course, focus now since we are in Portugal, that have these really amazing strategies that they are updating. I think this is also extremely important to adopt something and then to revise it. Then we have individual universities, and again, being in Portugal, let me point out the practice example. I'm sure that you heard before one program as well, but the University of Coimbra, which is one of the oldest universities in the world, I guess, did that even before the national was accepted. And how now we, coming back to us, let's say, what we try to do is both through education events and also projects networking to raise the topic of dual career on a different. On European level, we have a wider approach that is a little bit similar to Portuguese model. So we consider student athletes and athlete students. It's not really just about the top elite athletes that are, of course, should be celebrated and focused on, but wider student population that we promote to have competitions in university sport, and at the same time to make sure through our organization, our partners, through networking, through events, also institutions understand that this is something that they should be proud of. And basically not to sleep, let's say, on the set models, because the environment is changing. We heard before the, let's say, consequences of COVID and the challenges, but at the same time, this was a great opportunities because everyone everyone had to adapt to the new realities. And the same universities maybe that before said it is not possible to have online individual systems, everything was suddenly possible. And I'm really happy to see that a lot of these universities either are adopting more systematically or they saw, okay, we survived, this is possible, let's continue to do so. And one more thing, you mentioned some years. EAS is celebrating 20th anniversary, EOS is celebrating 25th anniversary this year. We have the Council of Europe celebrating 75th anniversary, and we have university sport organizations around Europe that are celebrating more than 100 years. So the topic of dual career, of course, is something that we are promoting now, but it's not definitely something that is just invented.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you also for highlighting two main things is that when we talk about university, students, athletes, we think of our national student athletes, which are completely different from the other student athletes. Some are very much supported, some are not, depending on the national, local, regional, national policies. So the EU guidelines can give us some direction, and we have to refer to this, as can spread the good practice to be copied if possible. And the other thing is that they are not only the elite athletes. There are the athletes who struggle to and who compete at lower level with the same efforts, with the same time involvement. So thank you, Andrei, for addressing these two main things. And now, Andy. Andy is an athlete, and he's still an athlete. And actually he competed to the Olympics. He gave me the pin, which is very precious. And but he is also an entrepreneur. And how do you balance your sport career, your university career, and your business venture? And what strategies have been most effective for you, and that you want to share if other athletes want to have the same triple plan, not dual? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to, first of all, make a little introduction to what Lito said. Congratulations for what you're doing and to the entire team. This brought me back to when I was a kid, when I was 12, and I started surfing, and I was missing probably like 3 to 4 months out of 9 months of school a year. And back in the day, there was no programs for these, no specific programs. Teachers wouldn't know what to do. But they made it possible for me because they understood that this was something good for me and that it was going to bring me good opportunities. They trusted me to make it happen, and I'm super grateful for them. What I want to say with this is that this mindset of dual careers starts from very young. So it's amazing to listen to initiatives like this that really push this and um, give this responsibility not to other students and athletes that want to leave from the sport when they keep those responsibilities. So when I turned 18 and I finished my studies, I went to a university in Bilbao. So it was kind of a presentation of what the programs were of the university. I went there with all my friends, with the school brought us actually, and it just didn't fit with what I was looking for at the time because I had to be at that university, and definitely was like a turning moment in my career because I said, well, I'll give it a shot to surf, to sport. I think I'm going to find a better opportunity in the future, which it happened. Actually, it came from a very bad moment for me because it's when I got injured. And I went to football club, actually, Real Sociedad, to do the rehabilitation process. And they had back in already, they had an academic director. And he told me about this option that I could study online. And I, like, so I can study online. And I can be whatever I want, and I can do a degree in business administration and management, which was one of my favorite things. And together we made it happen. So also my curiosity about this business administration and management came from for me as a necessity because surfing is a small sport and we have many incomes. From prize monies or from contests, unless you're like a star, which I was not and I'm not. So I had to find
No,
other
Olympian.
ways. And sponsorships were actually this way of combining getting better at surfing while I could pay my trips and go to contests and get better at surfing. So I thought, well, then I have to find a way to get better at surfing while I'm interesting for the brands, no? And this is how I try to make myself a company and be of interest to brands that would support my lifestyle and that within my lifestyle they would just place some products, no, or their philosophy of doing things so that they could get the return. Um, Now I'm not finished with my degree yet because instead of 4 years, I extended a bit, maybe up to six. Hopefully, we'll be successful in this sense. But I reached the Olympics thanks to my studies as well because I was told, no, you have to focus only on surfing because this is how you're gonna get it and this is how you're gonna get your goals. And I was thinking, is it that the way, or maybe it's about embracing this uncertainty and embracing this challenge and also embracing different factors, not only my sport. And the studies brought me this in the way I thought, and it definitely made me a better surfer because I could understand better strategies that I applied in the pre-Olympic to qualify for the Olympics, and to work better with my team and to actually think on the future and say, okay, I'm doing the right thing for the future now. When I listen to stories like Jeffries, like Sophia, I'd like to be one of them in the future. It starts now. It's not. It's more like a marathon. And in this case, I think the dual career and everything you are doing, all these initiatives, no, definitely make me more aware of the way for me, um, how to and believing it in an even stronger way. I'm happy to give it like 4 more years to this new Olympic cycle. I know it's going to be harder, but as long as I'm also following this dual career makes me confident that I will find better opportunities in the future.
Thank you. Thank you. Also because one of the major points on the is entrepreneurship of the athlete and to train them. And there are some European projects already finished with mock training programs available. So thank you a lot. Can I ask you one thing, Victor? Because I was very much impressed of your vision to detect and support talent from the very beginning, at least from the high school. But what about parents? Because usually athletes mention that parents and coaches are the main supporter of their dual career. And with Portugal also, we develop a online educational program for parents who have talented athletes. It's called Empatia Sport to support these talented young athletes. Can you tell us what you do for the parents in this program, if anything?
Muito bem.
Okay, thank you. I'm very happy with everything that I've heard today. In terms of parents, especially mothers, mothers are the lionesses. There is no gender policy because fathers also participate, but mothers are present body and soul. They never, never leave their cubs. And I will explain this further, okay? Just give me a minute. For the program, for the government in Portugal, dual career, and it only makes sense if you look at it holistically. If the training of the athlete means the training of the student, hence the training of the person. Or else at the end of the athlete career, the person will be a problem. It's a wholesome, holistic approach. The project is not the same in the 25 schools. It's necessarily different because educational projects are different. We need to put it in context first. Second, the best way to prepare the career is to do it within the career. Never delay things. If you can do it today, don't do it tomorrow. When the athlete's career is done, student comes about. We also benefit from a set of skills that they learn in sport. Hence, how successful they are in school. They have two jobs. Cue the parents. Give some priority to schedules. And where we are facing the greatest difficulty, because there was an exponential growth, is to get feedback from clubs and federations. But nothing's perfect. It's a process, right? That's why we're thinking on having Portugal. I don't know if I can say this, Mr. Secretary of State, in a new job in Portugal, which is the sports tutor for former athletes. And it will be a connection between municipalities, schools, clubs. As for mothers and fathers, well, they are an integral part of the process. When we meet with teachers and with coaches, we make a point of having parents there. We had 80 parents in a meeting in Santo Tirso recently. That's the only way to bring everyone about. That's the only way to have some co accountability. In the municipality of Matosinhos, there is a project for dual careers with an amazing room where athletes meet, parents meet, and for example, when students are abroad, parents meet there because we work in person in a hybrid manner and also online. Parents are detrimental when we are working on anticipation, when we need to manage training, where the school made 3 or 4 adjustments. As a rule of thumb, there is a mother lion coming about or a mother lioness. We do understand that mothers help arrange schedules because they know there's a study actually with mothers and fathers also, okay? And the parents make it easier. They are more eager to leap, for example, an event in sport than in the school because they know that the school is the future of their children and they have been quite useful in improvement suggestions. We try to bring everyone into the scene.
And if I might, I would also tell everybody that if you want to use Empatia Sport in other languages, there are 5 languages. One is Portuguese, Italian, Slovenian, English, and French, because we work with INSEP on this. Feel free, and the platform is open to other languages. So now I would ask Duarte, because we are talking about high school education. Do you feel that it's feasible to have this form of support available for students all through their academic career? So having a link, bridging the gap between high school and university, and whether there is a system in place in this uh, in this area.
Thank you. It's working now. First of all,
Yes.
Okay. We have had the chance to visit a university in Spain that is the Catholic University in Murcia, UCAM. And UCAM is one of from the universities I know, especially in Europe. UCAM is maybe a wonderful reference. In the last Olympics, I think they had 27 athletes they participating. So 27 students that were Olympic or Paralympic athletes. There are not many countries that take so much students, so much athletes. And it's a university that does a lot of online training, as Andy mentioned, and the new technologies made it much easier. Um, the life of students, especially it's harder for some teachers. There are some teachers in the room, so I must be careful. But teacher, before the pandemic, they were always. It was hard for teachers to understand this need for students to be and be in classes. Within the pandemic time, it was a while that helped accelerating to put in place the online classes because they had that experience already. It was easy for their team to use to do it nationally. It is important to have this continuity because if we don't allow for this continuity, the students that are 4, 5, 6 years in the secondary school, they get to higher education. If we don't have this continuity of support, the shock will be even bigger than the normal one. Sometimes you change city, you change your number, you change your girlfriend, sometimes, or even family. But there is a huge shock if there is no longer support, and if it is so immediate from August to September or July to September, there is a very big shock, and one might lose a researcher, a professor, an engineer, and lose also a great athlete. That being said, Portugal will start the pilot project with some higher education institutions, and some of them are here. I see here Professor Damião, Professor Filipa. Some institutions are here, and they have signed the protocol with the Portuguese state for a commitment of uh, trying under Vitor Pradal to experiences of a wide program in higher education. So many teachers are here and they know the academic life better than we do. They know that it's not as easy as that. Because if secondary schools don't have so much autonomy in terms of pedagogy, of economics, but the universities, Professor Laura, you are at the university and you know that professors need that autonomy. And that autonomy might be a risk for the project, but it can also be an opportunity because the universities that want to do so may differentiate. And with this program to support the dual career, they can better recruit the best, recruit those who better represent Portugal and even in other countries in Europe, the best of the best, so that they follow their studies there because we know that an athlete at this level, if they want to be the best athletes, if they want to be good students, good professionals, they will be the good examples that that university will put in the market, in our lives, in our society. So I believe that despite the challenge of autonomy, it might become an opportunity to differentiate and to have a great partner there. In this case, six great partners in the project, the pilot project. Something else that's fundamental has to do with research. If the university starts having this program, this project, this type of students, student athletes that are away, I mentioned, for example, the surfer that is going to search the best for the best waves for a long time. But I'm thinking about the winter sports. We have some winter sports athletes that are away because they cannot train in Portugal. The fact that they have this type of students can increase the research in dual careers, the research in sports, and we need qualified research to bring to sports. There's a lot of research that doesn't qualify our coaches and our system. The fact that we have these basic cells might bring some improvements, especially for the sports students. Thank you very much.
I would stay here ages, not just as a panel, because I've been in dual career network for more than 10 years. I heard that we have all flights to take, and but would like just to thank all the panelists and open some questions from the audience because there are so many things we could address. And I have one question also for one in the audience in case afterwards. So, any question? Oh, just one thing, Duarte. I'm not just a university professor. I've been also a high school professor for a decade. So a teacher for a decade. So I know the issue. One first. Okay, first the the ladies first, please, and then we have down there another member of the consultative committee. No, no. Oh, okay. He has already the mic. Okay, go. Yes, yes.
Okay.
I guess.
Bom dia a todos.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Luis Couto. I'm the regional director of sports in the autonomous region of the Azores. I'll speak in Portuguese. I'm sorry, I'm going to speak in Azorian because it's quite similar to Portuguese, but okay, that's my language. I come here in two different jobs. I reside in an outermost region that is quite concerned. I'm quite concerned in the autonomous region has a lot of concerns on the impacts of the sports in school in our region and in other outermost regions. And they are most of these regions are islands, and because they are islands, there is a discontinuity in terms of geography. We have absences from school when we do local activities. We have absence from schools when we do regional activities, and absence in school when we do national activities and also internationally. So our problem is much bigger than the others, and I think it's our problem and other outermost regions' problem. Many times we don't see in the legislation this type of concern that is the sports, the sports student that is in the border. He has they need the quality participation with a high performance that can bring this elevation of their level of participation, but they also have the right of their school success. This is an issue that I wanted to ask Pardal if there is that type of concern and if in fact there is this concern with islands that they can be that can if they can have this type of process despite the fact that we know that we are in an autonomous region, but the autonomous region also depends on the republic. My second question is to present
And Victor, please.
well, the question is quite complex, but I think it's up to the school to create inclusion situations for all students. That's the first step. Because sometimes there is an interpretation because of the fact that the legislation solves the problem. No, it's not an issue. Sometimes legislation only postpones funerals. The higher education student has a supporting legislation, but now he has a music exam. Will he do it after an international proof? Well, the law allows for postponing a week. And what about that? Well, legislation is important, of course, but it's not enough by itself. You need structural support measures outside the law. How to do things? How am I going to apply to enforce the law? These are the structural measures that I mentioned before. Legislation is important, but you need structural measures. Answering the question of my dear friend, well, the school must find the solution of inclusion. There is in the legislation of the ministry, the law 54 and 55, they create situations of inclusion for students not with the disability, but those who have difficulty to access the curricula. But we need to have a plan, pedagogical plan, and customized plan at the school level to create the situation of inclusion for these athlete students. But you need to understand if there is legislation to support these levels of athletes, and if there's not, there should be. And the regional government has done a lot of good work in these matters of sports. They have some orders, regional orders that are good quality, but it's always something to be done at the school level. The student, because he's an athlete and has a sports level that the regional government might consider of excellence and as an anchor for development of the sports of the island, in this case, that is fundamental to be registered in the law.
Working with the parents, we learned a lot on environmental sport, sport that are individual, team, very different ones in different countries and so on. So I complete agree that proactivity is one of the solutions. Legislation important to be proactive. It's equally, if not more important. So another question, please.
Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you very much for your very insightful interventions. Given the rapid evolution of sports and, of course, the changes in the educational and employment landscape, as you mentioned earlier, my question is, what do you consider as the biggest challenges and opportunities for dual career athletes in the future? And how can national sport authorities best prepare for them?
Please, whoever wants to answer.
I'm not here. Um, I I think or I believe that the programs on dual career will be everywhere. Uh, Not because the countries will support that with the resources, with the law, with the funds, with the human resources as well, but because we will all believe that all students, all athletes uh, they should have their opportunity to do whatever they want. And if the government support with the law, if the leadership of the school believe that is important, if the parents fight for that opportunity, I truly believe that all the students will have the opportunities wherever they are. One thing that is very important as well is the support movement to make also the move for that support. Because nowadays, what we see and what we feel is more the academic that is moving forward and pushing to have better support in school, and only a few clubs or federations have enough programs or enough people to support in the other side. So the network is not truly founded yet, but I think we will walk the walk.
Julie, she wants to.
Et si je peux ajouter
Yes, if you will allow me, I would like to add a few things that go in the right direction, in the same direction as what has been said by Duarte. We should have more numerous exchanges on the international scene, for instance, and Laura knows it because she's chairing a major association. The goal being to exchange best practices, and this was said yesterday during the conference day. This is what is lacking for a number of countries and for several of us. We need to know what initiatives are being implemented in various countries, especially when it comes to double career, but also when it comes to supporting athletes' project in a broader sense. I do believe that this would allow us all to gain more skills, to share expertise, and maybe to share expertise and experiences, but also skills sharing on this very notion of double careers. And maybe this would allow us to try initiatives. We know that all countries are different from one another, but if we try, if we are proactive, then maybe we could start testing things, trying things out, see whether it works or not. But it would allow us to start exchanging and to say, well, this is what we implemented. There was a decree, there was a law, but with this university, with this school, we implemented such initiative which actually worked. Having an exchange of good practices is absolutely instrumental, I do believe.
One more up there. He was there and then okay, he has some.
May I? May I?
Yes.
I move here near the mic. Antonio
Please.
Tessidore, representing the European Network of Sport Education. So in recent years, we have seen a growing, fast growing of the dual career programs in both universities and sport federations. And we have seen also today a wonderful example with the Portuguese project. However, this is not uniform within across the countries. So, which common strategies can be adopted in the future to make the process more uniform and reduce this gap? Thanks.
Who wants to answer? I can just. You have a responsibility. You are the network of sport education. So the university have to learn one from each other, and in their autonomy, use this knowledge and improve. But
Eu penso que
I believe, and you don't need to imagine that much to realize all things that are fundamental. To start with, to ensure big dual career dimension, if you look at the network of 2012, you find a great answer that is still very current. Because there it said that you can only have an effective dual career policy if you have an inter-ministry program that includes education, sports, health, and social security. While you don't have a strategic project that includes these entities, there will be greater difficulty to have an European dual career project. I've been 15 years studying and testing these processes. In Portugal, you have an example. We have two portfolios in education and sports that have been working with this project since it started 8 years ago. And we know that it's pivotal to have the sports and education involved in the project and higher education now together with that. It's essential, and that is to create a mandate, to create institutional interest and political leadership to take the decisions. It's very important. Then the second issue that I think that is absolutely fundamental is that we shouldn't stop at legislation. In 2012, it was said in the guidelines there is a wide range of legislation, but there are no structural measures. Look at the good practices that come from the guidelines for higher education and secondary education. For higher education, the virtual learning environments were there in 2012. 2012. And why? Because there were good practices. There was, before the pandemic, we got an award that was awarded to six entities for UNESCO because of distance learning. Does it solve all the problems of dual career? No, only a small part. That's why from the 1300, we have 150 in distance learning. The other ones are on site or hybrid learning because athletes need contact with their teachers. They need the support. They need the support. because they are still creating their sports. But we need a strategic plan that involves at least two ministries and then a strategic policy in the different fields of governance.
It's a killer. But I would thank you, all of you, for being interested in dual career, for your future activities and action. And if you have any topic you think is important to address during the Ask Cafe, feel free to send the topic and we will work it out. We have 3 or 4 cafe a year, so we can have 8 or 10 panelists in this cafe is 1 hour and we can continue the discussion. And let me thank, obviously, the Council of Europe, EPAS, for their commitment in dual career in the next
Mr.
years.
President, Mr. President,
Yes.
as we agreed yesterday, we, Portuguese WAR program and ES Network, we will promote a technical visit on April 2 of 2024. So if someone wants to visit the program, Vitor will receive you very well.
Thank you so much, and thanks to all the panelists, the actual athletes, the former one, and the managers. Thank you, because all of you are very vital for us. Thank you.
So once again, huge thank you also to you, Laura, for fantastic moderation and your huge commitment to dual career. Thanks to all of the panelists. Let's do one more round of applause for them. So, last but by no means least, it's my absolute pleasure now to introduce Sophie Quesney. She is head of the Council of Europe's Sport Division, and she's the Executive Secretary of the Enlarged Partial Agreement on Sport, EPAS, and Sophie will give the final words. And just one point, there isn't actually coffee afterwards or lunch, but if you want to mingle afterwards and have questions for panelists, please do grab them. Sophie, please take the floor.
Thank you, Francine. Dear Secretary of State for Sport, Pedro Dias, dear President of the Portuguese National Olympic Committee, Artur Lopes, dear President of the Paralympic Committee, José Lourenço, dear President of the Governing Board of EPAS, Alexandre Asting, dear President of the Consultative Committee of EPAS, Charlotte Girard Fabre, dear speakers, esteemed guests, colleagues, dear all. As I stand before you now, I really feel the challenge it is to follow such an extraordinary lineup of speakers. I want to thank you most profoundly and sincerely for your remarkable contributions. You have shaken us, you have made us reflect, you have inspired us. The overarching theme of our morning was leadership. And we couldn't dream of a better demonstration of the transformative power triggered by leaders than hearing your experiences and actions. It is truly an honor to share this space with such inspiring individuals. You call for greater leadership, for change, this call will continue to resonate loudly beyond the walls of this room. Yes, it is about imagining a better future, and regrettably enough, after all that has already been done, the finish line still seems far away in terms of gender equality. It sometimes feels even further away than what we would have thought a few years ago. I will confess a striking example and take full responsibility for this. The first meeting that was held this week in the context of our 18th Conference of Ministers responsible for sport, which was the conference marking the 10th anniversary of the Macolin Convention, was held in the same room, and a man-only panel, yes, a panel, as it's called, was featured. Anna-Marie, you mentioned that we give up too easily, and it is about deliberate actions. And by not being attentive to this myself, I have in a way given up. That is the danger of progress. You feel things are on the right track and you let your guard down. But we are clearly far away from any gender balance in sport if we look at all dimensions of sport, including leadership positions. It was mentioned several times today. I will again repeat it. We will document the state of gender equality in sport with the indicators of our joint project with the European Union, which is the project All In Plus. And figures can be blunt. We will soon have them. We look forward to presenting them to you on 13th of February next year in the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg. Not only do we have an opportunity to make change, we have the responsibility to do so. And there I look at our youth delegates. I know that you will do better. I would also like to come back to the fantastic example that was just presented this morning of the high performance school units. I had the privilege to visit it myself last year in May, and it was a blast indeed. It is one of the best practices that is being promoted in EPAS. We have, sorry, I'm lost in my pages. Thank you for allowing the young athletes to train with passion and benefit of an incredible level of education and support wherever they train or they compete. Finally, I would like to underline how we have been boosted by the energy that you've shared with us this morning. There are positive measures, there are great strategies, and there is great empowerment. This is what we will leave Porto with. What we discussed this morning is essential to sport governance. And we will pursue our action, our promotion of the European Sports Charter, and of a values-based sport. I would like to conclude by expressing an immense gratitude and thanks. So I will be short, but I would like to make those thanks. First, to all the delegates and our online participants this morning that have been attending the conference and this focus session in particular. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I would like to thank our fantastic speakers and please once again join me in applauding them. Thank you to the fabulous team that has put this amazing conference, and it's indeed one team, as it was said yesterday, the Portugal EPAS team. I thank everyone for the hard work, the commitment, and the passion. I'd like to thank our interpreters. I'd like to thank the technical crew, and thank my great colleagues. Thank you to a great IPDJ team. Thank you to the government teaming up with us on this event. We have really felt the collective spirit in putting up this conference. I thank our dear host of the three municipalities, two of Porto, Matosinhos and Vila Nova de Gaia, for their warm hospitality and having made us feel so welcome here in Porto. I have the pleasure to close this conference and we look forward to welcoming you in Monaco 2026. Muito obrigada.
Thank you very much, everyone. So that brings the morning session to a close. Big thanks, Sophie, for all your hard work and huge commitment to the subject. I've got a little practical announcement now to mention, as we're all in the room. So as you know, this is all part of the ministerial conference, and there is a social program. Hard to believe after we've worked so hard on the resolution on good governance, but you know, social programs are important as well. So there is a bus leaving here to go from the conference centre to visit FC Porto Museum, one at 2:30 for ministers and heads of delegation, and one at 3 o'clock for all other participants. Thank you very much and have a lovely afternoon. Bye-bye.